Hi guys, and welcome back to my Evilness podcast. Today we will be talking about murderer James Ryan O'Neill. Now, James was born Lee Anthony Bridgart in 1947 in Melbourne, Victoria. He is an Australian convicted murderer and suspected serial killer who was sentenced to life in prison in Tasmania for killing a young boy in February of 1975. There are theories, however, that O'Neill was responsible for a number of other child murders that had taken place in several other Australian states between the mid-1960s through to his imprisonment in 1975. O'Neill had a decent upbringing, attending good schools, and after college he started working in real estate. Between 1965 and 1968, O'Neill, then Bridgart, had worked in the opal industry, which required him to frequently travel between Melbourne and Cootapedy in, wait for it, South Australia, which is where the Beaumont children went missing in 1966, which he does not like to talk about this time very much. Before securing work on a cattle station in the Kimberley region of Western Australia, he went on to become a gun dealer. In 1969, while working as a gun dealer, a business associate accidentally shot O'Neill in the head while playing with a pistol. The bullet entered the right side of his forehead and came out of his neck. This accident cost him his sense of smell and the ability to taste. He was already an impulsive person. Could this have made his impulses worse? He is also known to have associates in the Melbourne underworld such as George Joseph. George Joseph is the man who supplied the gun that was used to kill Donald McCoy, who was an anti-drugs campaigner. O'Neill, then Bridgart, gave many accounts for the bullet wound to different people, which included, but are not limited to, it being a result from him serving in Vietnam, his mother's boyfriend shot him, and that he was an ASIO spy. In 1971, Bridgart, as O'Neill was then known, was charged with a string of offences, 12 in total, involving the abductions and sexual assaults of 4 boys in Victoria. O'Neill skipped bail and fled to Western Australia. He won't talk about this, he says on his lawyer's advice, but it is on his 1991 parole assessment. O'Neill describes himself as a heterosexual male, saying, quote, "I have no idea," when asked why he chose young boys as his victims. James blames the gun accident earlier in his life for not being able to remember the murder with which he was charged. But does he not remember? He did take the police to the body he hid. So trial documents revealed that as a child, James O'Neill had the tendency to fantasize. There were also occasions of cruelty to animals, lying, arson, and truancy, which if you don't know what that is, it is skipping school. One of the psychiatrists who assessed James suspected that James had been molested as a child, probably by someone close to him. He also does not like to talk about his relationship with his mother. Could there possibly be a link between these two? After skipping bail in Victoria, he disappeared for a while. In an interview, he said he wouldn't say where he had been when he was there on legal advice. James O'Neill met a young Tasmanian barmaid named Carol at the Fitzroy Crossing pub. They went on to get married. There were rumours of domestic violence in the marriage. In November of 1974, the couple moved to Tasmania, and this is when Bridgart changed his name to James Ryan O'Neill, assuming that by changing it, they mean changed it legally, because many people by this stage already knew him as James or Jim. In February of 1975, while on his way to pick up his wife and newborn son from hospital, which would have been the Royal Hobart Hospital because that is the main hospital in southern Tasmania, this is when James Ryan O'Neill found his first victim. Nine-year-old Ricky John Smith was on his way to the shop to buy his father a carton of cigarettes. Yes, I know that sounds strange, but it was the way it was back in those days. Like, you know, my mum tells me of stories of going to the shop to buy her parents cigarettes. Anyways, this was in Eagle Hawk Neck in Tasmania, when O'Neill murdered him and dumped his body in remote bushland. O'Neill even offered his help in searching for the missing boy. All the while, he was plotting his next murder. Over the following 2 weeks, there were multiple children, around 4 or 5, abducted in separate incidents, but fortunately these children managed to escape. O'Neill then abducted 9-year-old Bruce Colin Wilson and murdered him. Bruce Wilson's body was found near Risdon Vale 3 months after Ricky Smith's disappearance. Bruce had also been running an errand to the shop, but for milk, but I've actually also seen that it was for a newspaper, so I'm not sure it was milk or a newspaper, or maybe both. So the murders were investigated by police, including Sergeant Richard McCready, who went on to become the Tasmanian Police Commissioner. James O'Neill and his wife were tracked to a motel in Launceston, where they were preparing to leave the state. At the time of the murders, James was employed as a barman at the Loofah Hotel, which is now known as the Eagle Hawk Neck Hotel. O'Neill was arrested for both murders and led police to where Ricky Smith's body was hidden. When he showed them, his words were, "There it is." He showed no remorse at all. After his arrest, following legal practice at the time, he was only tried for Ricky Smith's murder. O'Neill pled insanity and claimed police punched him and held a gun to his head before Sergeant McCready and another detective took him to Ricky Smith's body. Both of these officers denied this. The defence, which was led by W.J.E. Cox, suggested a personality disorder due to his gun accident earlier in life. However, the jury were not fooled by this, and after only 3.5 hours, they found James Ryan O'Neill guilty of murder and sentenced him to imprisonment for the term of his natural life on the 14th of November in 1975. He became eligible to apply for parole in 1986. He applied in 1991, but was denied. James O'Neill is Tasmania's longest-serving prisoner for a single offence. Even though it is known that he committed 2 child murders, he is suspected to have been responsible for many more, and he was relatively unknown until he was named as a possible suspect in the Beaumont children case, of which he allegedly told people he had done it. He can be placed in the area at the time, and when asked, all he says is, "I couldn't have done that. I was in Melbourne at the time." He never mentions Adelaide, the capital of South Australia, which it is known that he was in that area also. Other cases that police believe that he may have been involved in include the Adelaide Oval case, the disappearance of Joanna Ratcliffe, and Kirsty Gordon. On the 9th of the 1st in 1974, a boy was abducted and raped in Elizabeth, South Australia, which they also think James might be connected to. And another case that they believe he may be connected to happened on the 10th of the 1st of 1974, which was the abduction and buggery, which is anal or oral copulation by penetration of the male organ into the anus or mouth of another person of either sex. This again happened in Elizabeth. There is not much information on either of these last 2 cases, though, that I could find. On the 29th of August 1974, O'Neill moved to Derby, a town in the Kimberley region of Western Australia. Within weeks of his arrival, a 12-year-old boy disappeared off the street after just being at the shop. This boy was last seen getting into a car driven by a European man outside Elder Store in Derby. His name was Jimmy Taylor. At the time, police suspected he was a runaway and no foul play was involved. But in 1979, Derby police advised the family that there were no further inquiries to be made. That was until in 2006, when the Taylor family watched a documentary about O'Neill, which revealed O'Neill, then Bridgard, was residing in or near Derby at the time. However, despite police in several different Australian states believing James O'Neill has committed many murders, he has only ever been charged with one. There is a documentary about James O'Neill, which is called The Fisherman. You can find it on YouTube. This came about after an article in a newspaper that reported that O'Neill had been moved to the Hayes Prison Farm, which is a low-security facility in Tasmania, in 1991, and he was allowed to go fishing in the Derwent River with only his dog for company, so no guards, no one to watch him. This said that O'Neill had no criminal history before committing the two murders. Maybe they didn't know about the name change, and he's skipping bail because he has a parole sheet. But anyway, that is the story of James Ryan O'Neill, who is still currently in prison. He hasn't passed away yet. He would be around 74 though, I believe. But yeah, thank you guys so much for listening. I hope you have a great day today, and I will get another one done really soon. Bye.